Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode we're going to be looking at a Stanier tank engine that I purchased quite a while ago now from a chap that said that it didn't run anymore. The motor spins but the loco doesn't run, so this could be a case of the old cracked gears as we've looked at before, but as it's a different model we're going to take a look. Now this is a really nice model of a powerful looking tank engine in LMS lined black. I really do like this model. But as you can see, for a loco drive model, it is freewheeling, so that is a very bad sign. Either the cogs have gone on the gears have gone on the axle, or the gears have gone in the motor. So as you just heard there, the loco is picking up from all wheels and the motor is indeed spinning. So let's get this body shell off and have a look what's going on the inside. Now, to remove the body shell, there is one screw under the bunker, which you can undo with a flat bladed screwdriver. And then the chassis lifts away and unclips from two front clips that connect into the buffer beam. It's a DCC ready model, which will save me some work later on. Now, to get into this worm gear, you have to remove this bracket on the back, which also contains that rear bogie. And I believe this is the same chassis as Hornby's Fowler 4P, but I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure it's the same chassis. And removing this screw reveals the motor worm. Now the motor is held in place with black tack, so that is simply pulled to the side. And then the main idler gear, as it's called there, is taken out. And there's quite a bit of old sticky grease on this, but that is spinning freely on the gear shaft, so there is a problem. It's actually come off in my hand, so this is cracked. And unusually, and this is a first for me, it's the smaller of the gears that's cracked and not the large one, but the plastic has gone very brittle. As you'll see here, it snaps extremely easily, and it really shouldn't be able to do that. There's the crack in the gear. So we're going to have to try and find a new idler gear for this. Now, as I said, spares for the Stanier tank are non-existent, but I'm pretty sure this is the same chassis as the Fowler 4P, so I'm going to find an idler gear for that and then see if that fits. I'm just revolving the wheels there and checking that gear on the axle, but that seems to be okay. Using a cotton bud of methylated spirits, I'm going to get rid of all this old sticky grease that's in here from when the model was made. It has gone extremely waxy in its appearance, so this needs to be removed. And I've got a bag of spare parts here, so I'm going to have a look at this idler gear that I've got that came off a scrap loco several years ago. It appears to be in good condition, there's no cracks in it, so I'm going to set that down and then give this a quick clean up with the cotton bud of methylated spirits, as well as it's still got some old remnants of grease on this. So let's put that in there, orientate it the correct way, it just drops in place. The motor is then pushed back onto that black tack, and then trying to move the loco along, you can see everything's locked in place as it should be. So I've taken it out again, and I'm just going to put some of this grease on that axle gear down there. This Labelle 106 is brilliant stuff, quite expensive but very, very good. And you really don't need a lot. A small amount will go through the drivetrain and spread nice and evenly through running. So there we go, there's the idler gear back in, and then a small amount of oil is dropped onto these bearings as this spins within the die-cast chassis as it goes along, and it's not held in place with any proper bearings. So that's the idler gear replaced, and the motor's back on, and I'm going to put this retaining and bogie bracket back on, and then I'm going to give it a quick test to make sure that everything is meshing correctly and that the wheels are turning as they should and they're not catching at all. Also going to put a very, very small amount of this grease on the worm gear. That's all you need, is a very, very small amount. I haven't managed to find any decent silicone grease that I used to use yet, but I'm still on the lookout. And I also put a small amount of oil as well on the motor bearings. because this model, I've had this at least a year, and who knows when the last time it actually ran was. Inside the worm housing is a lot of the old sticky grease again, so this was all removed with a cotton bud of mess, and that's nice and clean. And then this was put back in place, and the screw was replaced. And with battery test, you can see now that the wheels are turning nicely, and the gear is meshing quite well, so I'm just going to give that a quick run to spread that lubrication around. And now what I'm going to do is, it's quite a challenge because the wires are all over the top of this, but I'm going to remove the DCC blanking plate and fit a decoder so that it can run on my layout. Now the blanking plate is in there quite stiff, it comes out very easy. It's very hard to get to, that blanking plate, because of the wires all over the all over the top of it. Now I'm going to fit this TCS decoder that I had in my toolbox, and this is that broken plastic gear. Now I've cleaned it up, like it's so brittle, the plastic. Now whether this is a reaction to the grease or not, I don't know, but it really shouldn't break like that. Bachmann gears on their newer models don't break, and this model is a newer version. It's probably less than 10 years old, to be honest, but it shouldn't be. It should last longer than that. But other than the broken gear, it looks to be in very good condition. So the DCC decoder can sit in the smoke box, and then the two front lugs are engaged, and the chassis is gently pushed back into the body shell, making sure that no wires are trapped, all the clips are engaged, and that it sits down squarely as it should. You got to be careful when you put these models back together, as there's so many fine details and pipework underneath. It is easy to damage them if you're not careful. Eventually it clips back in place, and I can re-secure it with the screw. But before that, I'm going to give it a quick battery test, so that I know that no wires are trapped and nothing has come loose during reassembly. I'm happy to see that everything is working as it should. In fact, it's running really nicely. And then, like I said, I reattach that screw that goes under the coal bunker, and that is the loco part reassembled. And we'll turn our attention to looking in that detail pack. Before I do that, I'm going to give it a quick track test to make sure that it's meshing and correct, because this will show up any faults that running it upside down with a battery won't. And I'm pleased to see straight off the bat that it's working and running lovely. It really is a superb looking model, this. So now it's been bench tested, it's ended into my loco cradle, and I'm going to start cleaning the wheels. Now, the driving wheels on this loco that pick up the power weren't actually overly that dirty, so I'm just giving them a clean over with a cotton bud of methylated spirits on the wheel treads and the wheel backs, because the pickups press onto the wheel back, so they must be clean as well. And I was surprised at how clean the driving wheels were, considering that the pony wheels and the bogie wheels underneath the bunker were actually quite filthy. And they were so dirty I had to get a cocktail stick to scrape off the black carbon buildup and then polish it with a cotton bud of mess. It's worth doing, because if you don't, all that will happen is this black stuff on the wheels here will transfer to your track when you're running your models, and then transfer itself back to the wheel. It's a never-ending circuit of poor running and frustration. So it is important to have clean wheels and clean track to aid in good running. So now the wheels have all been cleaned, I'm going to have a look in the detail pack, which is quite limited. I think somebody might have been in here before, because when I eventually get it open, there is the brake rigging, which just pinged off there. The couplings for this, but only one front step. Now this front step clips into a hole in the front, just before the front buffer beam there. But I'm not going to fit it, as fitting this will stop this model running around second radius curves. And I do have some second radius in the garden, so I don't want to impede this model's running. Now what I do here is a little bit out of sequence. Now I haven't taken the base keeper plate off this model yet, and I was loath to do so because Hornby went through a period of an absolutely stupid idea of pickups where the brass strips are just resting on metal rivets and die-cast lugs from the chassis to provide a pickup. Now if these are disturbed, it's hell's own job getting them back in correctly, working correctly. So I was loath to take this chassis apart, which is why I'm putting the brake rigging on now. But after I'd done it, I noticed a bit of fluff and that build up around the pickup, so I end up fitting the brake rigging and then trying to take the chassis keeper plate off. But if you're going to do it the opposite way around. Now the plastic is quite flexible, so it allows me to bend it into the holes in the brake blocks there that hold the brake rigging in place. Don't go overboard with this, as it is, you can snap it if you're not careful. And it clips in place with hangers under the brake blocks, and then there's the two brake retarders underneath the cab. The NEN couplers are then fitted. The front one was quite stiff, but it pushes into the pocket. And then going to the rear of the model, the previous owner has actually glued the vacuum pipe into the coupling hole, but he's used like a Yoo-hoo glue, so it comes out easily with no marks on the body shell. And now I've got to try and clip that NEN coupling into the bogie, which I did. And this is what I mentioned earlier. I'm now going to try and take this chassis keeper plate off with the brake rigging in place. The front pony wheel is held on with the chassis keeper plate, and I had to do this because the NEN pocket hadn't been fully pushed in. The pocket sits in a die-cast lug, as you can see there, and it hadn't been fully pushed in, so there was no way for me to do that with it on the model. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the screws that keep the chassis keeper plate on and try and access the model bearings just to add a bit of oil to them. Now I'm working very gently here and gingerly because I do not want those pickups to fall out of place. As I said, it's hell's own job to get them back in place when they come off because they're not hardwired. The brass tabs literally rest on two tiny rivets. So using my pin dropper, I'm adding a small amount of oil because the model is fitted with proper bearings on the wheels and they were quite dry. So it was the right thing to do. It's just a nightmare with these type of models from this era and the pickup arrangements. So the front pony wheel is then put back in place, and then I repeat the process for the rear wheel and then put all the screws back in place. And now I'm just wiping some excess oil off the wheel backs there that I spilt. Using the pin dropper, it just touched the wheel back slightly. But now I'm going to test the wheels to make sure none of those pickups have moved, and to my delight they haven't. Although the middle one's a bit dodgy, but after a bit of running it comes back. And the vacuum pipe I took off the back, I'm actually going to refit to the front of the model. As it is the vacuum pipe for the front, there was no room for it on the back. And that's basically it. A relatively simple rebuild for a change. Changing the idler gear and giving it a fresh lubrication and a clean-up. And this gorgeous Stanier tank is now ready for service on the preserved line on my layout. It'll be nice to see it running because I've had this model for some time. One thing that's a great shame on this model, and I'm trying to highlight here with an LED torch, it's got full cab detail, but you can't actually see it because the cab is fully enclosed. But kudos to Hornby for including it, as it does look quite nice when you can actually see it. Now I'm getting pretty, it's come to my attention that we're fast approaching the 100th episode of Trash to Track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the comments for any questions you have for me about modelling, or indeed my day job as a railway signalman. And on the 100th episode, I'll do a live, on or around that time, I'll do a live Q&A session if anybody's interested. If you've got an engine you'd like to see featured on a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. I'll have a look at getting it sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. Well, I'll leave you with the Stanier tank now running around with some period LMS coaches. Thank you so much for watching Trash to Track. Get them questions in the comments and I'll pick a few to read out. Like, share and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.